night of my sister-in-law's rehearsal dinner, I was sitting across from my husband at a long table decorated with white roses and ivory candles, and I had a manila envelope in my lap that was going to change everything. Not for me. For them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is June. I was 26 when I married into the Whitfield family, and I want to tell you that I knew what I was getting into. I want to tell you I had warnings, that there were signs, and that I ignored them with open eyes. That would at least make me seem smart in hindsight. The truth is simpler and more embarrassing than that. I was in love. I was completely, stupidly in love with a man who happened to come with a mother who had already decided, before she'd even shaken my hand, that I was not what she had envisioned for her son. His mother's name was Constance. Everyone called her Connie, except her children, who called her Mom, and me, who spent 3 years trying different combinations, Mrs. Whitfield, Connie, Mom, and never once landing on something that felt right, because nothing was right, because nothing was ever going to be right. Because the problem was never the name I used. The problem was that I existed. I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. My father drove a delivery truck for a regional grocery chain for 31 years. My mother worked the front desk at a pediatric dental office. We were not poor. We were not rich. We were the kind of family that took one vacation a year to the Outer Banks and considered it a gift. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University on a combination of grants, a small scholarship, and student loans that I was still paying off when I met my husband, and I was proud of that. I built something from scratch. I thought that counted for something. It did not count for something, not in Connie's world. I met my husband, Thomas, at a friend's birthday party in Richmond. He was funny and warm, and he laughed at his own jokes in a way that should have been annoying but wasn't. He had grown up in Northern Virginia, in a part of Fairfax County where the houses sat back from the road behind long driveways, and the school district names meant something. His father had built a regional insurance company from the ground up. His mother had not worked. Not because she couldn't, but because she believed and said so, often, that a woman who chose to raise her children herself was doing something more important than any office job could offer. I respected that. I didn't agree with it as a universal truth, but I respected that it was her truth. What I did not respect and did not understand at first was the corollary she had attached to that belief, that women who worked because they had to, rather than because they chose to, were a different category of person entirely. Thomas and I dated for a year and a half before he proposed. His mother, in that year and a half, took me to lunch twice. Both times, she ordered for the table without asking what I wanted. Both times, she asked questions that were shaped like compliments, but functioned like scalpels. You must be so proud of yourself for getting through school on your own. That takes real determination, doesn't it? And it's wonderful that Thomas has found someone so practical. She said practical, the way someone else might say serviceable. Like I was a piece of furniture that would hold up fine, but would never be the focal point of the room. Thomas saw none of it. Or he saw it and filed it under "that's just how she is," which is the sentence that ends more conversations than it should. We got married in September 3 years ago. It was a small wedding. 40 people, a vineyard venue outside Charlottesville. My mother's friend made the cake. It was genuinely beautiful. Connie wore cream, which I noticed and said nothing about. In the photos from that day, she is always slightly turned away from me, or looking somewhere past my shoulder, as though the camera caught her in the middle of deciding not to be fully present. We moved into a rental in Alexandria. Thomas worked in commercial real estate. I worked in marketing for a mid-sized software company, and I was good at it. I was promoted once in our first year of marriage and was being considered for a director-level position. I liked my work. I liked having my own income, my own professional identity, my own reasons to get up in the morning beyond the life we were building together. Connie considered this a personal failing. Not loudly. She was never loud. She operated at a frequency just below the threshold of what Thomas could hear, which meant I spent 3 years questioning my own perception. She would say things like, "Thomas mentioned you've been working late a lot. I hope you're not burning yourself out, June. Some things can't be recovered once they're gone." She would send me articles about work-life balance, clipped from magazines with no note attached. She would ask about our plans for children in a tone that implied the clock was running and I was the one stalling it. Her husband, Thomas's father, a quiet man named George, who I genuinely liked, would sometimes catch my eye across the dinner table and give me a small, almost imperceptible nod that I interpreted as I see it too, and I'm sorry. We never talked about it directly. Some alliances are wordless. The year things accelerated was the year Thomas's younger sister Melissa got engaged. Melissa was 24, getting married to a man named Scott, whose family had a lake house in the Adirondacks and a last name that Connie said like it was something to taste. The engagement happened in March. By April, Connie had booked the venue, hired the planner, and begun circling me. I can only describe it as circling, in a way that felt new and deliberate, like something had been decided. I found out later, through George, that Connie had told Thomas around that time that she didn't think our marriage was sustainable. That was the word she used. Sustainable. Like I was a resource being poorly managed. What followed was 6 months in which Thomas became quieter and more distant in ways I could feel but not name. He stopped reaching for my hand in public. He started taking his mother's calls in the other room. When I tried to talk about it, he said I was being sensitive. And I believed him because I wanted to, and because I was tired, and because I had been told my whole life that the appropriate response to discomfort was to push through it. The rehearsal dinner for Melissa and Scott's wedding was a Friday night in June at a private room in a Georgetown restaurant that Connie had rented out entirely. Round tables, low lighting, a menu that had been chosen months in advance. 60 people, most of them Scott's family and Connie's friends, orbiting the room in that particular way of people who have known each other so long they've stopped noticing they're performing. I sat next to Thomas. He was on his phone more than he wasn't. Connie stood up after the first course to give a toast. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about Melissa and what a joy she had been to raise. She said something about Scott's family that made everyone laugh. And then she looked at me, directly at me, across the room, and said, "We've learned a lot in this family about what makes a marriage last. And I think Melissa has made a very wise choice." The room didn't react. Why would they? It was a perfectly normal sentence. The sentence was not for the room. The sentence was for me. I smiled. I had become very good at smiling. After the toast, Connie made her way around the tables. When she got to ours, she sat in the empty chair on my other side. Thomas had gotten up to get a drink, and she placed, without ceremony, a plain white envelope on the table between us. "I think it's time we were honest with each other," she said. I looked at the envelope. I looked at her. I didn't pick it up. "Thomas isn't going to do this on his own," she said. "He loves you in his way, but love isn't always enough, and I think somewhere inside you know that too." I opened the envelope. Divorce papers. Pre-filled. Thomas's signature already on the wine. I sat with that for a moment. The noise of the room continued around us. Someone laughed at a nearby table. A waiter cleared a bread plate. The world did not stop, which is the thing about devastating moments that no one tells you. The world just keeps moving, indifferent, and you have to decide in real time what you're going to do with the floor falling out beneath you. I folded the papers back into the envelope. "Okay," I said. Connie blinked. She had expected something else. Tears maybe. Or argument. She had not expected okay. "I need to make a call," I said. "Excuse me." I walked out of the private room, through the main dining area of the restaurant, and out onto the sidewalk on M Street. It was warm, the way June in DC is warm. Heavy and close, the air tasting faintly of the river. I called my sister, Anna. She answered on the second ring. "It happened," I said. "Where are you?" "Georgetown, the rehearsal dinner." "Stay there," she said. "Don't go back in yet. Are you okay?" I thought about it. "I think I've actually been expecting this for a year," I said. "Does that make it better or worse?" "It makes it survivable," she said. "Which is what matters right now." Here's what Connie did not know when she handed me that envelope. She did not know that 4 months earlier, when Thomas had started sleeping in the guest room and taking his calls in the hallway, I had made an appointment with a family law attorney in Arlington. I'd gone alone on a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd spent 90 minutes understanding exactly what my rights were and what my options looked like. She did not know that I had documented, carefully and chronologically, every significant decision in our marriage that touched on finances, every joint account deposit, every expense paid for my income, every asset acquired during the marriage, the current value of Thomas's retirement account, the equity in the rental we'd been building toward purchasing. My attorney had reviewed all of it. She did not know that Virginia is an equitable distribution state. That equitable does not mean equal, but it does not mean equal. But it does mean that both parties' contributions to the marriage, financial and otherwise, are considered. That my 3 years of income, which had supported our household while Thomas built his client base, was documented and relevant. She did not know that I had, 3 weeks prior, accepted a director position at my company. Base salary, $94,000, not including the performance bonus structure I'd negotiated. And she did not know that I had spent the last 4 months quietly transferring my personal savings, money I had earned before the marriage, which I'd been depositing into a joint savings account out of habit and a sense of partnership, into an individual account in my name only, after my attorney confirmed it was legally mine to do so. I went back inside. Thomas had returned to the table. He looked at me. He looked at the envelope on the table. Something moved across his face that I couldn't read. Regret, maybe, or relief, or just the blankness of a man who had let someone else drive for so long that he no longer remembered how to steer. I sat down. I'm going to sign them, I said quietly. I just want you to know that I'm not doing it because I failed. I'm doing it because I finally understand what's been happening, and I'm choosing to stop participating in it. He didn't say anything. I signed the papers. Right there, at the rehearsal dinner, at the table with the white linens and the half-empty breadbasket, with the sound of Melissa laughing at something across the room. Then I folded them neatly, put them back in the envelope, and flagged down a waiter. "Excuse me," I said. "Could you get this to the woman in the blue dress at the host table? Her name is Connie." The waiter nodded and took the envelope. I watched Connie receive it. I watched her open it, look at my signature, and look across the room at me. I raised my water glass in a small, private gesture that the room didn't notice. She had expected a scene. I gave her paperwork. I stayed for the rest of the rehearsal dinner. I ate the salmon. I congratulated Melissa and Scott. I shook George's hand at the end of the night, and he held it a beat longer than was necessary, and I understood. I did not attend the wedding the next day. I sent a card and a gift from the registry, a Le Creuset Dutch oven, because I had always had good taste, and I refused to let pettiness be the thing that changed that. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. It was not contentious because I had been prepared and because my attorney was precise, and because Thomas, in the end, seemed mostly relieved that it was happening cleanly. Connie had imagined, I think, that she was throwing me overboard. What she had actually done was hand me a life preserver I hadn't known to ask for. I moved into an apartment in Arlington in August, 2nd floor, hardwood floors, a small balcony where I started keeping a container garden that gave me more satisfaction than made sense. I started the director role in September. I was terrified and then I wasn't, which is how most things worth doing go. I called my dad the week I moved in. He drove up from Roanoke with my uncle and spent a Saturday helping me put together furniture and hang shelves. And at the end of the day, we sat on my balcony, and he said, "You seem like yourself again." I hadn't known I'd stopped being myself, but I understood what he meant. Here's what I've learned, and I don't say it to be neat or to wrap things up in a way that doesn't honor how hard it was. I say it because I believe it. There are people who will spend years quietly convincing you that your worth is contingent on your income, your family name, your usefulness to their vision of how things should be. They do it without malice, some of them. They do it because it's simply how they see the world, sorted by category, and you have been placed in a category they have decided is lesser. The work, the real work, is not convincing them otherwise. It is removing yourself from their system of categorization entirely. Connie handed me divorce papers at her daughter's rehearsal dinner, in a room full of people, and she thought she was ending something. She was. Just not what she thought. I used to think that being a good person meant absorbing things quietly. That if I just kept my head down, kept working, kept being reasonable, the people around me would eventually see it. I was wrong about that. Not about being good, but about what goodness actually requires of you. Connie spent 3 years trying to reshape how I saw myself, and for a while, it worked. Not completely, not in the obvious ways, but in the slow erosion that happens when someone keeps tapping the same spot. I started second-guessing my career choices, my income, the fact that I needed loans to get through college. I started measuring myself against a standard I hadn't agreed to and couldn't meet. That's the thing about people who operate the way she did. They don't need to say anything overtly cruel. They just need you to start doing the work for them. What changed for me wasn't a single moment. It was a decision, the kind that happens quietly, on a Tuesday afternoon in an attorney's office in Arlington. When you realize that the most honest thing you can do is stop pretending the situation is something other than what it is. I didn't have a plan for revenge. I had a plan for myself. And those are very different things. I think about the months I spent documenting our finances, reviewing our accounts, understanding my legal standing, not with anger, but with clarity. That kind of clarity is something I wish I'd found sooner. It's not instinctive, especially when you love someone or when you want to believe that love is enough to carry a marriage through the weight of a family that never wanted you in it. But there's a version of intelligence that only comes from being willing to see things as they actually are, not as you hoped they would be. I had to earn that. It cost me something to get there. And the integrity piece. That's the part I'm most proud of. I stayed. I showed up to that rehearsal dinner. I ate the salmon. I congratulated Melissa and Scott with sincerity. Because their happiness had nothing to do with what their mother had done to mine. I sent a wedding gift I'd carefully chosen because I refused to let someone else's smallness become my own. Those choices were not about them. They were about who I wanted to be when the situation was over, and I had to live with myself. George shook my hand at the end of that night and held it a beat too long. I've thought about that a lot. He saw the whole thing for years, and he stayed quiet because that's what people do inside families that have a particular gravity to them. I don't hold it against him, but I think about what it costs a person to stay silent when they know something is wrong, and I think that's its own kind of lesson, that witnessing injustice and doing nothing has a price, even if it's paid slowly and privately. The apartment in Arlington is mine now. The balcony garden is thriving in a way that feels disproportionately meaningful. The director role turned out to be exactly as hard and exactly as good as I needed it to be. What Connie handed me at that table, I think, was the last thing she intended to give me, a reason to stop waiting for permission to take my own life seriously. I'd been doing the work all along. I just needed to stop apologizing for it.